It's the biggest line of bullshit. It's one of the best misinformation campaigns ever run. You got multi-billion-dollar companies spending millions of dollars to make you the culpable party. Coca-Cola, they recently got caught making the Global Energy Balance Network out of the University of Colorado, where they spent $120 million and make it all about, hey, you're culpable because you're not burning enough calories. You're either eating too much or a sloth, you're not exercising enough, and it has absolutely no basis in human physiology whatsoever. The most beautiful misinformation campaigns come from the ones that seem kind of plausible.
Welcome back to the Metabolic Rebellion. I'm Kevin Bury, co-founder of Metabolics, and I'm here with my co-founder, physician, friend, and best-selling author, Dr. Brent Brotzman. Welcome to 2026. Happy New Year, Brent.
Happy New Year to you, Kev.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy that we are already in the new year. It's been an interesting last 12 months as we got the company started and we really start to get this thing going. I think that 2026 is the year that we're really going to shake up the industry. We started our mission, our rebellion, if you will, last year, as I say, and, we are ready to break through and get the message out there. And I think this is the year when our viewers and listeners are going to start to take control of their metabolic health. And we're going to start off the new year with a really big topic. This is the first of our three-part series on losing weight the right way. And I know this is something you're very passionate about, Dr. B. So let's jump right into it, right?
And I think if you and I think we're stepping on some multi-billion-dollar toes and misinformation campaigns. So if you and I get hit by a Coca-Cola truck or a Volkswagen truck in this year, I think I want people to look into it further.
I think that is yes. If there's a news story about us getting hit by any kind of soft drink truck, we will know why. Well, let's start there, right? So we're going to tackle today. We're going to attempt to tackle one of the most famous, repeated, and frankly harmful ideas in modern health, and that is this old adage that you need to eat less and move more, right? That slogan has been around for years and years. It's calorie restricted diets had been a thing for decades and decades. If that slogan actually worked, 85 years of calorie restriction diets would have solved obesity, right? We wouldn't have diabetes or pre-diabetes. The contestants on The Biggest Loser would be thriving right now. They'd be all lean and mean and ripped. And unfortunately, that's just not the case, right? So let's jump right into this. Why do you think, Brent, that calorie restriction diets just have never worked?
Well, probably because it's the biggest line of bullshit. It's one of the best misinformation campaigns ever run. You got multi-billion-dollar companies spending millions of dollars to, make you the culpable party. So, hey, it's not the 29 grams of sugar that we're hitting you with a big insulin, sugar spike, insulin spike, putting it away into your fat. It makes you culpable. Hey, calories in, calories out. Well, it's the first law of thermodynamics. It's your fault. You're either a sloth and you're not exercising enough, or you're a glutton and you're eating too much. And it has absolutely no basis in human physiology whatsoever. It's wonderful if you're in the high school physics lab, or if you're a car battery, but it doesn't pertain for shit if you're talking about the physiology of the human anatomy and the human metabolism of food.
Okay, well let's start there. That's a good point, right? So whenever I hear you talk about the science behind weight loss, which is about losing fat, not muscle, certainly not your bone density, lean mass, rather. I always hear you talking about these two competing paradigms to losing weight, right? And losing really, which is the most important thing, fat. So let's talk a little bit more about these weight loss paradigms. So what are the two competing weight loss paradigms?
Yeah, the first is the energy balance paradigm, which is kind of the calories in, calories out. And then the other one is the carbohydrate-insulin paradigm.
Let's double click on the first one, right? The energy balance. This is one that I think is probably the most familiar for people. So why don't you unpack that a little bit for us? Tell us about, what it is, what is its origin, and what frankly are some of its flaws.
Yeah, this one pisses me off. I'm going to enjoy killing this one for you. So this is one that you and I've been hearing forever. Hey, Dr. Brotzman, you're 47 pounds overweight despite the fact that you're burning tons of calories, doing exercise every day. It's the energy balance is calories in, calories out. So this is the biggest misinformation campaign. Multi-billion-dollar companies spending millions of dollars to get you to believe this. And the reason why it's totally flawed is this is beautiful for a closed system. So if you're a Tesla, if you're a car battery, if you're a high school physics lab, this is the first law of thermodynamics. It's calories in equals calories out. It's 100 calories of Coke equals 100 calories of broccoli. It's Diet Coke is 0 calories, so you're gonna be shredded because you're 0 calories. It's eat less, move more. All that probably works great in your Tesla or your car battery. It doesn't have anything to do with human physiology whatsoever. But it's the most beautiful misinformation campaigns come from the ones that seem kind of plausible.
So where did this energy balance paradigm even come from? Who are the scientists behind it? Who is the one that actually created it?
Well, for 85 years of unsuccessful tests, this has been they call it the crash diet, the yo-yo diet, the Weight Watchers, the calories in, calories out, counting calories diet. It's also more appropriately called the starvation diet because your body, if you're doing this, it feels like you're in starvation. So it started out with a bunch of unsuccessful attempts at it. And then it became the big sugar, big Coca-Cola paradigm where they recently got caught, a bunch of, this is nothing we're making up, but they just got caught making the global energy balance network out of University of Colorado, where they spent $120 million and under the table told them, hey guys, we're taking all these hits for drinking 2 sugar-sweetened beverages a day increases your mortality risk by 20%, your cancer risk by 15%, and it cuts 4 or 5 years off your life. We need to redirect some of the attention off of what you're taking in, and we need to make this calories in, calories out, and make it all about, hey, you're culpable because you're not burning enough calories. You're either eating too much, you're a sloth, or you're not burning enough calories, you're not exercising enough. So this has become the Coca-Cola Big Sugar, Big Soda campaign, spending millions of dollars to get you to think that you're a car battery. Before we get further into the carbohydrate, let me disprove it for you and show you again that it's a closed system. It only first law of thermodynamics only applies in your high school physics lab or in your Tesla battery or in your car battery, not in human physiology. So if you weigh 140 pounds and you're cutting 500 calories a day, 7 days a week, so that's 3,500 calories a week or a pound a week. You weigh 140 pounds, and if indeed this is a closed system, and it's calories in equals calories out, then in 2 years and 9 months, you're going to weigh 0 pounds. Okay. I'm not sure about you. I've never seen that in 30 years of my ortho sports medicine clinic, and I've never seen anybody spontaneously poof in front of me. So what happens is you plateau out after 6 weeks into something called adaptive thermogenesis. We'll get into that in a minute. So issue number one, overly simplistic, is calories in equals calories out. Works in closed systems, doesn't work we don't go to 0 pounds. Number two, if you eat less, move more. We're going to show you with the NIH study that if you eat less, move more, you go into adaptive thermogenesis and ratchet down your burning metabolic rate, and then you start burning your muscle. We'll get into that. Number three, 100 calories of Coca-Cola is equal to 100 calories of broccoli. There's no bad calories in Coca-Cola's world. 90 calories of Coke is just as good as 90 calories of broccoli. I don't know how much I have to convince you of that. And finally, 0 calories of Diet Coke is wonderful for you. You look down and you're gonna be able to see your abdominal musculature through your shredded loss of subcutaneous fat. That also has never happened in an open system. So it's a very flawed. It sounds great, but calories in, calories out does not apply to the open system, which is your hormonally controlled body.
So we've covered energy balance paradigm, got that, and how almost ludicrous it seems especially when you think about 100 calories of broccoli versus 0 calories of Diet Coke and which one's better for you. But let's shift gear. Let's shift gears now and let's talk about the carbohydrate insulin model, right? So this is going to be new for people. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about it? Why don't you introduce it and then tell us why you feel so strongly that this is really the most appropriate or the correct paradigm for us?
Yeah, this is based in our human physiology of how we handle different macronutrients. So If you eat protein, you don't get much of a blood sugar spike. You don't get much of an insulin spike. If you eat fat, you get no blood sugar spike. You get no insulin spike. If you eat carbohydrates, you'll get some blood sugar spike. You'll get some insulin spike. If you eat ultra processed carbohydrates with added sugars and stripped of the protective fiber, you get a big sugar spike, blood sugar spike, big insulin spike, stays in there longer. And here's the evil genius, heavy on genius, really heavy on evil, is that when you tell a population for the first time, hey, you need to eat 6 small meals a day to keep your metabolism up, which is not true, then what happens is when your kid sits down to eat American Heart Association approved Honey Nut Cheerios, and they get a big sugar spike and a big insulin spike, and the insulin stays longer than the sugar, then what happens is 3 hours later they go from hyperglycemia or elevated sugar down to hypoglycemic, and they're really hungry. And so one of the studies, an older study by Ludwig et al., shows that if your child eats a high glycemic breakfast like Honey Nut Cheerios in the morning, then guess what? They eat 50% more food in the next meal because of the hypoglycemia. They're hungry again. So what you've done is you've designed a system where you marketed and you need to have 6 small meals a day or sugar sweetened beverages to keep your energy up, or a Snickers bar 6 times a day keeps your insulin up. And then also you make ultra processed food with lots of carbohydrate, sugar spikes, your insulin's up.
You bring up insulin. I hear you talk about this all the time, Dr. B. You say insulin is king and that HSL, which is hormone sensitive lipase, is critical. Can you explain what HSL for our audience that aren't familiar with that and why it's so critical?
Well, when you want to lose weight, you want to burn your own fat. And the only way you can burn your own fat is through a hormone, HSL, hormone sensitive lipase. So, and lipase means to cleave lipid, which is fat. So, HSL, for you to burn your own fat, HSL has to go in and cleave it and let it mobilize out. So then you can burn it, turn it into ketones, and go into ketosis and burn your own fat. The problem is if you have elevated levels of insulin, which the average of 93% of Americans have very elevated levels of insulin because of the ultra processed diet, then elevated insulin blocks HSL, so you cannot burn your own fat. So if you calorically restrict and you can't burn fat, the body's in panic mode. First thing it does is it slows down your basal metabolic rate because it's afraid you're going to starve to death because it can't access your fat. And then it says, oh man, I'm in trouble. I can't access fat. I still haven't I haven't ratcheted down the amount of calories I'm burning. And it starts burning your muscle through something called gluconeogenesis. So that's a problem. You don't want to burn muscle. You don't want to burn lean mass because longevity is based on having strength in your muscle mass.
So that explains why, what happened with the biggest losers. I hear you talk about this NIH study all the time, Dr. B. Tell us more about how that impacted the contestants on that show, that famous show, The Biggest Loser, and what was the research that really went into why it worked and then why it didn't work long term.
Yeah, this was kind of a cool and surprising and interesting finding. A lot of us didn't, some further literature came from it, but at the time it was really shocking. So, yeah, so you take the America's Biggest Loser. They were the poster children of eat less, move more, right? They were eating 2,000 calories a day. They went down to eating 1,000 calories a day. So they're eating less, and then they were moving more. The trainers were working them out multiple hours a day. So that's what I was trying to do for years. That's what we've all been told. Well, here's what happens. Because the 1,000 calories they were still eating was the standard American diet, it was still glycemic, it still was blood sugar spiking, they still had elevated insulin levels. So what happens is, what the study showed is their body was burning 2,000 calories, they were eating 2,000 calories. They went down to eating 1,000 calories. The body panicked because it says, oh, I'm in starvation mode now. And so I can't, HSL is blocked. I can't burn my own fat. So the first thing your body does, which is really horrible, is that, but it doesn't want to starve to death, it ratchets down your resting metabolic burn rate. So you're no longer burning 2,000 calories. They went down and they were only burning 1,400 calories. And the problem is they looked at these contestants 6 years later and they were still only burning 1,400 calories. So it doesn't come back up when you come off the diet. So this is starvation mode. Body says, okay, I'm getting 2,000 calories now. I'm getting 1,000. I can't access my own fat. I can't burn it because HSL is blocked by my elevated insulin. So I'm going to go down to 1,400 calories. I'm never going to come back up, which is a huge problem. And I still need 400 calories because to get down to the 1,000. So I've already slowed down my thyroid. With my T3. I'm now not 98.6 degrees. I'm only 97 degrees. I'm really ratcheted down on. I'm just burning the least amount of calories I can. I feel horrible, but got to get the other 400 calories, and I'm blocked from burning my fat. So then it goes into gluconeogenesis and it burned their muscle. And so again, that's a problem. So in that study, they showed 6 years later, the same contestants were burning on average 700 calories less than when they started out the contest. So they were still burning 1,400 calories. So here's the horrible part about that. You don't burn the fat, you burn a little bit of it, but most of it is muscle. Your resting metabolic burn rate goes down to 1,400 calories, never to come back. So guess what happens when you get hungry? Let's say you're 6 months in, you're like, I can't do this anymore. My ghrelin, my hunger hormones telling me I'm starving. You start eating 2,000 calories again. You think, okay, I'm just going back to what, but now you're 600 calories over. So that's why all the contestants just about regain their weight, and it comes back as fat because of this whole paradigm. You have reset your burn rate at 1,400 calories. So 2,000 calories is 600 or beyond, and that comes back as fat.
And when you think about that, when after they've reset and they try to get back to kind of quote unquote a normal life, that includes the standard American diet, which now we know is really becoming the kind of the global diet, right? So let's talk about that, right? The standard American diet. We've talked a little bit about it several times throughout this conversation. You know, when we think about that, and you like to talk about GG6, or our great grandmother 6 generations earlier. Let's talk about the difference in what we eat and what those folks that came off of the America's Biggest Loser program, what did they eat versus what GG6 was eating 125 years ago.
Yeah, again, big sugar, big soda wants to tell you, hey, it's, go out and burn thousands and thousands of calories. Well, Gigi Mom 6 had a 1.2% obesity rate. We have 70% of our population is either overweight or obese. There was zero childhood obesity. Now we've got, a third of our kids and adolescents are obese. There was 0.28% diabetes, and it was actually type 1, not type 2. And we now have, a third of our population is diabetic. So, and yet in 1900, there were no gyms, there was no running, there was no CrossFit. She didn't have a treadmill. Basically, they hadn't invented tennis shoes yet. So the difference was she, like the healthy ancestral population, she was eating twice a day, 2 or 3 times a day, not 6 small meals. She was eating an ancestral diet. So she would eat, you'd eat a cow or a deer, and you wouldn't have a big sugar spike. You'd eat protein and you'd eat fat. She was eating natural foods. She would pick up an orange and she would eat the orange. She wouldn't make it into orange juice. She wasn't eating sugar sweetened beverages. The only difference between her, she didn't quite make the miracle population list compared to our other ones because she was already up to 100 pounds of sugar. We're 80 pounds sugar. We're eating 150 pounds of sugar, almost our body weight in sugar a year. So she kind of got knocked off the miracle populations, but compared to us, she's a miracle, so with the rates.
Well, so let's talk a little bit more about that. You just mentioned a new term for us, is miracle populations, and I know there are several of them. And there's a very well known book called the Blue Zones. Let's talk about them. How do their diets compare to what Gigi Mom 6 was eating 125 years ago?
Right. Yeah, we looked in our research, we looked at the centenarians, people who live to be 100. We look at Blue Zone. We look at the Maasai in Africa. We looked at Schweitzer's African populations. We looked at the Inuit in Iceland. We looked at all these miracle populations that have none of our top 10 causes of mortality other than trauma and upper respiratory infection. And basically, they ate an ancestral diet. And there's multiple ways to get there. They could be ketogenic, they could be carnivore, depending on where they were. They were omnivores. Some of them ate, a fair amount of carbs, but the carbs still had protective fiber in them. So they were eating 2 or 3 times a day. We'll get into omega-6, omega-3 ratios, but they'd eat a deer or a cow with the omega-3 fat and the protein, which didn't spike their insulin. They'd eat it 2 or 3 times a day. Our hunter-gatherer way back for 2 million years, they'd eat, more like the modern day lion once every 2 or 3 days. But these miracle populations would eat 2 or 3 times a day. It was predominantly protein and fat. Any carbs they had fiber with them, so they weren't getting multiple blood sugar spikes a day, multiple insulin spikes.
All right, so that was fascinating, Dr. B. When people think about dieting, they think about starving themselves. You've talked about this before, these starvation diets, crash diets, sometimes yo-yo diets. So, what are the differences between those starvation-based diets and what you talk about and what we talk about, which is the idea of insulin lowering techniques, right? Or ILTs as we like to call them. So, give us a little bit of a contrast between, the starvation and these new concept of the ILTs.
Right. So as you kind of saw in the insulin carbohydrate model, if your insulin's elevated, you cannot burn your own fat. So what do you need to do? We need insulin lowering techniques, and there's multiple ways to get there. But in your normal diet, you want to decrease your insulin. So it's eating less meals per day. It's not eating blood sugar spiking, insulin spiking meals. It's allowing your insulin to stay low enough so that you can go back and forth and burn your own fat through HSL and go into ketosis, as opposed to your body saying, "Oh my gosh, I have no fat. I've got thousands, millions of calories of fat I could burn, but I can't. It's blocked. So I gotta go gluconeogenesis and burn my lean muscle mass because I'm starving to death."
So, Dr. B, this idea of insulin lowering techniques, I think there's some things that are going to surprise some people, right? I know I was surprised, for example, because I thought I was being really good, and before we started Opti, when I first started, working with you on this stuff, I was telling you that I'm drinking protein shakes every day. I'm throwing in a bunch of spinach and berries and things like that. And I think we all do those not we all, but a lot of people do that sort of thing. Or they drink, they're drinking all natural orange juice, or they're drinking all natural apple juice or these sorts of things, right? And we're surprised when we're not losing weight because in fact it's working counter to what you just talked about. So why don't you talk a little bit more about why that is? Because there's a secret little component that I've learned about, and that is the miracle of fiber and what it does for you in those things and what happens when we put it all together and it gets stripped out.
Right. Yeah, it kind of makes sense when you start reading the literature on how if you're drinking sugar sweetened beverages like cocoa and you get 29 grams of sugar, you get this big sugar spike, insulin spike, and elevated insulin goes on to obesity by putting it away into your fat. Elevated insulin goes on to elevated IGF-1, which is obesity related cancer. Elevated insulin goes on to all these cardiovascular things, but we won't go down that path today. But so you kind of see that with the sugar sweetened beverages. Well, what gets interesting is the same studies, they show that artificially sugar, so Diet Coke, Diet Pepsi, the artificial sugars still spike your brain, and your tongue receptors still say, "Okay, guys, I've got some sugar coming down there." They don't know it's artificially sweetened. So of course you still get the insulin spike, and if your insulin's elevated, you can't burn your HSL. So artificially sweetened beverages are still just as much of a problem. That's why it doesn't just fall off you. And the sad part is, I loved acai bowls, and I was drinking really healthy orange juice for years until I started reading this literature. But the same problem is it's good to eat an orange. It's good to eat an acai berry or blueberry because it's got the protective fiber built in with it. But the minute you to get it in a blender or you squeeze it and you have a big bolus of blood sugar spiking, orange juice, then you've taken away all the protective effects of fiber, and you're still going to get a big blood sugar spike and an insulin spike. So don't want to do, juices, don't want to do smoothies that have lots of carbohydrates in them. Uh, you know, do it like your ancestor did, in the season where there's lots of berries that they trusted. They go over and they'd pick the blueberries and they'd eat them with the protective fiber. There's even in Papua New Guinea, there's even one population that had 94% carbohydrates, but they were tubers and berries that had tons of fiber, and they were, healthy. They just had the dental caries, but their hearts were healthy. But so you need the fiber in there. You don't want to be drinking. So, we tell our clients drink coffee, but not with, the frappe, sugar laden black coffee, drink unsweetened iced tea, unsweetened green tea. You drink your sparkling, your water and your sparkling water, but you do not want the big sugar boluses or artificial sugar boluses to bump up your insulin.
Okay. All right. So we've covered that. I want to shift gears. You talked a little bit a few minutes ago about GLP-1s, and this is all the rage. This is the miracle drug that has taken the country and frankly the world by storm. I know a lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people are taking them, and I know you're highly concerned about GLP-1. So let's talk more about why you're concerned, and frankly, why you think they're not really what they're marketed to be.
Their mechanism is the exact same thing as a starvation diet. So the two mechanisms, the way they work, I would give the shots like crazy if the shot lowered your insulin and allowed your hormone sensitive lipase to mobilize your fat and burn your fat, but that's not what they do. They have two mechanisms. One of them is appetite suppression through your dopaminergic pathway, which basically, that's a bit of a problem because your pleasure, you don't have much pleasure, and you have to worry about suicidal ideation or anhedonia, which is lack of pleasure. But you got an appetite suppression through your brain through the dopaminergic pathway. And number two is it's a caloric restriction diet, which is basically, it's called gastroparesis. The GLP-1 agonists slow down the motility of your stomach. And so it's just a glorified caloric restriction by slowing down your GI tract. So the problem is you've got the same problems. You've got the diet they're still eating is the glycemic standard American diet for the few thousand, whatever 1,000 calories they're still eating. Their elevated insulin's blocking their HSL. They can't burn their fats, and they're really burning through their muscle like crazy. So that's why we're seeing the Wegovy face, the Ozempic face, because the intrinsic muscles, that we call that cachexia in the cancer wards where you look at, just where you have, or in the ICU where you have very little facial muscle. So you look at these folks and they look kind of, kind of concerning. But yeah, that's the problem. You're burning through your muscle like crazy, and you've got to have that muscle as longevity.
All right. So Brent, we are just about out of time. I want to ask you, what is one action you want people to take this week so they can start to make a change? We talked about this is the year that they're going to start to make a change. They're going to take back control of their metabolic health. So what is one simple action they can start this week with?
Think about what your grandmother in 1900, how would you model yourself around her? She didn't eat boxes of food. She didn't eat barcodes. She ate an ancestral diet. So if it's omega-3 fat, eat it. If it's, ocean caught fish, or if it's grass-fed beef, or if you're going to eat fruit, eat it as she would have picked it from the ground. Don't put it in a blender. Don't make it into a juice. Try to do an ancestral diet to mimic in 1900 before all this ultra processed food. Again, she had a 1.2% obesity rate and was very metabolically healthy. So act like your ancestors, mimic grandma Gigi Mom 6 in 1900. She was kind of a badass.
Dr. B, I think we accomplished our mission today. I think we completely flipped the script on everything we've been told about calories in, calories out, about willpower. To everyone listening, if you've ever felt like a failure because this idea of eating less and moving more didn't work for you, you're not alone. But here's the deal. I think you've just heard why. Dr. B did a good job of helping us understand we've been living in a broken paradigm, right? It's not our failure. It's not a character flaw. This is something that has not worked because, frankly, it's not the way our body's physiology was intended to work. If this episode hit home for you, share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Subscribe, like, come and join us at optimetabolics.com. We've got great tools there for you to really help you to understand how your biology actually works, and so that you can work with it, not against it, because we know that calories in, calories out does not work, right? If it did, we'd all be shredded right now. We would be all living our best lives. And if you're here, something just isn't quite right, and we ask that you help us, that you join us in our rebellion against bad science, and we will look forward to working with you and seeing you in an upcoming episode.